Thank you guys for coming. Can you guys hear me in the back? Is that okay? Perfect. I know it's a tough time, 3:30. I was just in a panel that said 10:30 is the best time to have a panel because you have the most energy, so I suspect 3:30 is the worst time to have a panel, so we're gonna try to make it super energizing for you before you have to go out and get some happy hour drinks and dinner. So I assure you that this is gonna be entertaining. These guys guaranteed it. So we'll get going from that.
We're not getting paid otherwise.
Yeah,
right?
no tricks here. Before I do get started, I want to set the stage because when they give me this panel, we had the word Bitcoin, and I want you to know that we're not going to talk about Bitcoin. This is not a Bitcoin discussion. It is somewhat related to a currency, though, and so I want to set the stage before I let our panelists introduce themselves, and I'll introduce myself as well. And we'll get a really heated discussion here because I think these guys are the best at what they do in the lifelong learning space. So we'll talk about that. Before I get started, though, the way I thought about this panel is that when you think about the degree, the college degree that you get, it's a piece of paper. It's a promissory note. And if you look at any dollar bill you pull out, we have a promissory note from the U.S. government. So question I ask these guys, and I will ask them in this panel, is what is the degree and how do we unbundle the degree so that we can apply it to a lifelong learning environment? So ultimately, if we're successful in this panel, I'd like to sort of think deeply about what you get with that piece of paper, much like what you get with a dollar bill is not worth anything unless the government, the Federal Reserve says it's worth something. In the case of a college degree, is not worth anything unless the institution that gave it to you says it's worth something, right? That you learned something. So it's provocative, but the questions we'll tackle here is whether that piece of paper can be awarded by other institutions. Could it be awarded by industry? Could it be awarded by nobody? Do you even need it? Or does it have to be awarded by a college, a traditional sort of institution? And is there other types of pieces of paper that we'll need in the future to make lifelong learning a reality? In the world I live in, ideally, much like the dollar makes the economy go smoothly in most cases, I think a common understanding what these pieces of paper, the knowledge that you have, will make our lifelong learning journey as employees and employers and leaders much more of a smoother ride, because I think right now we have a lot of different types of certification, and so we'll tackle that subject. Before we go there, I'll introduce myself. I'm Sergio Monsalve. I've been a venture capital investor in the lifelong learning space, future of work, and other software-related areas at Norwest Venture Partners. Most recently, I also joined Stanford as a lecturer in their graduate school of education. So I teach a class around EdTech, entrepreneurship, and innovation, where we have speakers and we learn a lot about this stuff. And I'm also on the board of trustee of Harvey Mudd College. So I hopefully get closer to the college environment through my work at Stanford and Harvey Mudd. And then I'm also on the board of Udemy as well. It's a lifelong learning platform in San Francisco. With that said, I'd like to have these guys introduce themselves with the mindset of what I just described. That how do you think about this future of work world and the world of certification, not certification? How do you make sense of this new world of lifelong learning as an adult? Go ahead.
Great. My name is Matt Cooper. I'm the CEO of Skillshare. Prior experience, I was at Upwork, previously Odesk, for 5 years. I was then CEO of a company called Visually, which was a online freelancer platform for creative work and visual content, and then joined Skillshare about 2.5 years ago. So I've been kind of in and out of the future of work world, freelance workforce, creative workforce. And when I think about sort of Skillshare, and so we are an online learning platform for creatives. And kind of the two trends that we are really betting our business on, number one is around creativity. When you think about all of the industries that are being rewritten by automation, technology innovation, the one thing that's really hard to automate is creativity. So if we can provide whether it's personal or professional opportunities to connect the dots from one discipline and apply them to the next. You can actually create a lot of value both as a business, as an individual employee. So we want to help people connect those dots and give them a very broad educational opportunity. The second is on the future of work. About 80% of our teachers are freelance. 80% of our students are either freelancers already or want to be freelancers in the next 2 years. So we see kind of our demographic, 80% of our users are younger than 40. That's what they want. They want that creative occupation. They want the self-determination and kind of the personal ownership that comes with being freelance, independent, running their own show. So those are certainly the trends that are driving our business. We have close to 8 million users on the platform. We have 26,000 classes taught by 8,000 teachers all over the globe. We grew at about 125% last year. So certainly the trends that we're highlighting are ultimately driving our business. I think for us, the question around credentials, I know that when I hire, yes, I look for proxies, and education I think has traditionally been the primary proxy. I think that is actually not as useful as it used to be, particularly within the design creative space. I can see your work. I can see your portfolio. You've got it online. I can see what you've actually done, not what your degree indicates you might be able to do. And even going back to my first job was in investment banking, they were taking English majors, accounting majors, finance majors, history majors, sticking them all in the same training class and spitting out investment banking analysts. So I think the days of the degree as the primary proxy are waning because there's just too many other ways to see what people have actually done as opposed to what we think they might be able to do.
Krishna.
Yeah, so thanks Sergio first of all inviting me as part of the panel. Hi everyone, I am Krishna. I am the founder and CEO of Simplilearn. Simplilearn was started as a blog about 10 years back, and today it provides digital skilling courses to professionals, and that also speaks about how the market is growing. Like 10 years back, there was hardly any of these companies who were in existence to provide people with some kind of courses so that they can fast track their career. What I see in the last few years is that there's a lot of talks going on about lifelong learning, but there are still a lot of people who are still in this denial mode that should I go for it or should I not go for it. So I don't think we have all of us put together have been in a position to convince everyone that this is for real. If you want to be continuously employed in a 70-year lifespan, then you need to continuously add something. And I see the market going there in next couple of years for sure, wherein the debate will get settled in favor of doing something. Now the question comes whether you want to do this lifelong learning through a university and get some kind of short degree, or you want some other kind of credential. In my own personal opinion and my experience of having trained about 1 million users so far on my platform, I think some kind of credential helps. Now that credential need not come from an accredited university, it can come from some organizations which are professional bodies, or it can come from some of the companies who are seen as a leader. Like for example, if someone wants to learn say cloud skills, they are better off getting a certification from a Microsoft or from an Amazon, not necessarily from an accredited organization or a very popular organization like Stanford. So I see that having some credential really helps in starting up a dialogue. If you are applying for a job, of course you can show your skills that I know this job, here are the projects that I have done, or here are some of the work that I have done in the past. But how do you start the dialogue? To start the dialogue by saying that, look, I'm certified by Amazon or I'm certified by Microsoft. That makes life so much easier. So I see them playing a role for sure. So in an ideal world, people will go to a university because not only they want to learn skill, they'll go to university because they want to learn a lot of life skills, right? You come out of your comfort of your home, you go to a university, you network with your friends, you learn how to grow up with people that you have never met in your life, and trying to manage, trying to kind of collaborate as well as compete at the same time in a college campus. I think that's a very, very important life skill. And after that, when you want to acquire skills, you can go to any of those providers that exist in the market and learn that. But the key thing that I think we should all keep on talking about is that this is for real. If you don't keep on reskilling all the time, however manner that you do to a degree, do with a certificate, or just learn a skill without going for credential, that's going to be a must to ensure continued employment in future.
Jonathan.
Hello, everybody. Jonathan Monk. I'm the head of corporate development at Degreed and oversee our skills business division. I actually don't think that, I may get kicked off for saying this, but I don't think that knowledge is the currency at all of the 21st century. I think skills are the currency of the 21st century. For me, there's a hierarchy. There's information, there's knowledge, there's skills, there's wisdom. I can learn anything anywhere in 5 seconds by asking Google information. I can get information instantly. I can get knowledge quickly. Skills are harder to get. You have to apply the knowledge in some way and actually be able to perform tasks. And that's what companies want. They don't want knowledge. They want people to be able to do stuff and to be able to do specific things at certain levels of aptitude. So Degreed's mission is we are a skill development and a skill measurement platform. We sell to the enterprise, and we believe that the world, the labor economy, whatever you want to call it, wants to speak the language of skills, but it can't. And the reason why it can't is we don't have a good currency, to what Sergio was talking about. We don't have a good currency for that. At the same time, we have more currencies than we've ever had. If you kind of look at the trend over the last 10 years, there's been this explosion of different ways to learn, all of these new platforms and catalogs. And what we are starting to see is now an explosion of different ways to signal completion and knowledge mastery of some of that content. So you have open badges, you have boot camps, you have course certifications and so forth. There's all these new currencies in the market. Adding more currencies doesn't solve the problem. What we need is a single universal currency that the supply side of the market and the demand side of the market recognize and value. That is what makes a currency really valuable. Initially you want it to be a gold-backed currency to prove that it has worth, but over time, sort of that matters less because people kind of trust it. So that's kind of the business that we're in, is how do you help people develop the skills that they need, and how do you help people signal the skills that they have so that they can transact in that marketplace. And that marketplace might be within the walls of your own business, right? You might be sitting and saying, how do we match the skills inside the business to the jobs to be done inside the business, but the broader application of the labor market holds the same way. How do we match the supply and demand more efficiently? So that's kind of the goal that we have at Degreed.
Carl. So you talked about skills, and I completely agree. I mean, it's not about knowledge, it's completely about skills. But I would say even more than that, it's not technical skills. I mean, yes, we need technical skills, and I'm talking, and I'll say a few words about Amdocs in a second, but the technical skills are not what makes the difference. It's the human skills, actually. So Amdocs is a 25,000+ employees company spread around 80 countries, basically providing product and services to IT product and services to what used to be the telco industry. Today it's service providers of all sorts. And I had learning and talent development, and my task is actually get people to actually absorb, first and foremost, get to become lifelong learner. Because no longer the days that we can actually teach them or get them to get the new skill, they need to figure that by themselves. And one of the things that that maybe I'll talk about it if I have time is a way that we started to map the skills for the people. But we acknowledge that it's not about the technical skills. That's not makes the difference. Eventually, our customers are not working with us because we only can deliver a code. They're working with us because we work with them, because we understand the challenges, because we can transform those challenges to eventually code, but because we work with them, and that's what makes all the difference in my eyes.
So let me start with you, Harl. We'll go backwards because in this panel, as you know, you're sort of the user and sort of utilizer of the platforms that these guys developed. How do you think about this notion that Jonathan brought up around the currency being a singular currency, something that can get translated from Amdocs to some other company? as an employee that is going to have multiple careers. How do you think about that in your organization? Ideally, you'd like to keep people in your organization forever and ever if they're good, but you eventually have to sort of train them and they have to move on. How do you think about all that in the life, the sort of the journey of your employees?
I think it's interesting. I think there's place for that, but at the end of the day, let's acknowledge that at the end of the day, we do have a replacement for that. I mean, when I was hired based on my CV to some extent, about my experience that I was able to communicate and my recommendations and the different sorts. So, and yes, there's an amount of risk, but people can see that. So I truly believe that, and we actually had a conversation with one of our business units that we try to implement kind of I want to call it a LinkedIn-like platform where people actually talk about their skills. We don't want to test them. We don't want to assess them. And the interesting conversation went that, and I'm talking to a business unit that has 4,000 employees, and the conversation went like, so how do we do that? And what happens if I'm saying that I'm an expert on Java? Then we'll know that in a few days. I'll get a task in Java and I'll suck at it. Sorry for my French, but. And all of a sudden it becomes not a conversation about my career development. It becomes now a conversation about how I'm leaving the company because I lied about my expertise. So if you make it that way, and if you hire me today, you'll know about my expertise pretty fast, right? Yes, there's a risk about it, and we want to minimize it, but we do have a way. All of us are hiring people, and we know when we made a good decision or when we made a wrong decision. It would be nice to get some kind of a nice certificate, but as you said, I mean, universities are not providing that, and I'm not sure that there's one body, someone that can sign on the quality of people. So it has to be based on what the people are actually telling about themselves. That's once again my view.
Got it. So let me ask you guys this. Along those lines, so if we were to create a perfect world where, the bachelor's degree from certain organization, college, is worth something to somebody because not just because of the skills, it's also the dorm life. I think there's plenty of research out there that shows that, if you've built your social capital inside the 4 years you were there, you're going to come out with a better opportunity, not just the skills, the hard skills or the soft skills. How do you think about applying that model or throwing it away and building your own as it relates to the 21 years old to 65 years old? Because we got a model for 18 to 21, whether it works or doesn't. I think there is a model out there. Whether we break it apart and rebuild it, that's another question. But you guys are kind of more focused on the lifelong learning space. So think about that, and how would you think about the ideal world in your lifelong learning environment?
Yeah. So from my perspective, what we do on Simply Learn platform is that we try to simulate a classroom learning environment online. So we do see a value wherein people who are learning the same course at the same time, coming together on our platform, learning from each other, learning from the instructor. But when they learn from each other, it's not only about learning a hard skill on how are you solving a problem. It's also about where do you work, what do you do, and relating to their work experience, what these guys are doing, and eventually also looking at that network for their career advancement, wherein I'm looking for an opportunity. If there's an opportunity in your organization, can I talk to you? So we see this happening all the time. Traditionally, what has happened in this lifelong learning space, or let's call it, I don't think that lifelong learning has become a reality. We are talking about it, but a lot of people have still not accepted that fact. There are two broad models of skilling. One is that you go to a video learning platform and learn at your own pace, at your own speed, completely on your own. And then you go to a bootcamp provider wherein you are part of a program for 2 weeks and you learn there. What we are trying to do is that we are trying to merge both of these together, that you learn at your own convenience online, but learn in a cohort of people who are trying to learn the same skill at the same time. So we definitely have seen a lot of uptick there. I also wanted to add to what Harel was saying, that people, if someone is claiming that they have a skill, they will get to know within the organization. But when we have engaged with a lot of Fortune 100 organizations, what we have seen is that you want to launch a program, and I'm talking more about hard skills because that's the area that we operate in. if you launch a program, let's say on pick up any area, let's say data science, and you expect people to sign up for that program, which is sponsored by an organization, that's one scenario. The other scenario is that the same data science program, everything is the same, and you attach a certification. That certification can come from either a certificate from a university or a certificate from another organization, let's say, for the namesake, say IBM. We have seen a much higher acceptance rate there because people see that now I get a certificate which is kind of currency that I can move from this organization to that organization. So however good thought the organization might have that I want to retain the skill, I want to train, but we have seen a mark like sometimes even 3x more completion by employees if they get something that they think they can carry forward to their next job.
Yeah, but so a few years back, I started my career as a programmer. If you give me an assessment on Java, C++ right now, I'll pass it. Don't get me writing code. So certificate and assessments is good, but I claim that people can actually pass it and get it. It's not really a good testament of their skills.
So I agree to you to some extent, but now those assessments have changed. They have become more hands-on driven. But what I find it surprising, and I'm not endorsing that view, is that the organizations are again valuing those certificates by saying that, oh, I'm looking for Java programmer, and one of the criteria is that if you're certified, you pass one particular stage of, say, shortlisting your resume, right?
I think we're also talking about an outdated model in general. I mean, the world is not heading towards Amdoc's corporate structure, right? The world is heading towards freelance, independent, specialists, not generalists. We're not evolving employees over the course of decades because they only stick around for 12 months. Yeah. And so I think when you look at credentialing and certification and skill validation in the traditional model, a lot of this holds true. When you're thinking about it, we no longer have a workforce that's going to have one job for 20 years or even 5 jobs for 5 years. They're going to work for 5 different companies within the same 6-month period. And that's where it just completely upsets the traditional skill validation paradigm. Like, I don't have time to develop you. You have to show up day one effective in what I need you to do. And when we've got people coming and going with that level of fluidity, like, I just don't have time for the traditional proxies to play themselves out. In a perfect world, I get to see you work in your job for 6 to 9 months. I decide whether or not you're any good, and then I keep you or I don't. That's just not how it works anymore. So I need much faster, shorter cycle proxies for what actually is effective. And again, looking at my Odesk Upwork experience, I can look through somebody's work history on Odesk. I see the star ratings. I can see what projects they worked on, who they worked for, how much they earned. I can just get much more granular detail in that marketplace style than I would get out of a traditional resume. And we are still hiring full-time employees. Skillshare is more of the traditional corporate structure, but I think we are constantly looking for the replacement for actually them working for us. The next best thing, in my opinion, is not an interview. It's not a certification. It's somebody in my company has worked with that person before and can vouch that they can do what they say because we've seen it. That sort of eliminates all of this. But I think what is really unknown is as we move to a heavier dosage of freelance in the workforce, it's going to upend a lot of these traditional. We won't have learning and development because they're not employees.
So it
upends everything.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the other thing is, why does this data even matter? Why do we need to be issuing credentials at all? Mm-hmm. What's in it for the individual? What's in it for the business? So, as a manager, I can sit down with a new hire and I can say, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, but who else knows? Or this person is really good at these things, who else knows? The problem is not who should have credentials and who shouldn't. The problem is, where does the data live and what do we do with it? Yeah. And if you are doing it right, you're collecting data to say, who's the best person to put on this project? Who's the next most qualified person to, take this new job or work on this, new initiative that we have? And until you know the skills that people have to deploy those resources effectively, it's a really tough challenge internally. And then secondly, we have to keep in mind what is in it for the individual. You already mentioned no one wants to go through an assessment. People hate being assessed. People hate being measured. But people love being recognized. Yep. They love having opportunities. We have to, if we're talking about how we, why does credentialing matter? What we have to deliver is opportunities for people. They want to grow. They want to have new experiences. They want to feel like they're contributing in new ways. And until we can deliver on that, sort of the measurement stuff doesn't really matter all that
So
much.
let me probe on that, because that's the crux of the currency, right? For us to have a fluid economy of human resources, you need to be able to move around from in the neighborhood of your realm of job, right? Let's say you're a designer, right? And that's going to be roughly your career throughout your life, or even a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, but roughly that neighborhood. So to be that, and for me to be for people to know what I know how to do, there needs to be some sort of translatable sort of signal throughout my life. So the question for you and for you guys, would you be better off if there were a third party, impartial, non-competitive, that would say, this is kind of the certification for a designer? Would that unlock your market?
I guess it's so hard to get the credential to match exactly what I need, right? So you can tell, and actually I don't need a third party to tell me if you're a good designer. Show me your portfolio. Show me your GitHub repository. Like if I can actually see your work and I can talk to people who have worked with you, so to get to the soft skills, if I can get to the soft skills, like guy works his ass off, he's not a jerk, okay, great, check that, and then I can actually see the work of what they've actually produced, that's much more interesting to me. I think LinkedIn was trying to get to some of this with the skills.
Yeah.
If you look at my LinkedIn profile, according to LinkedIn, I'm an expert at 99 things. I can assure you, I am not an expert at 99 things. So they were trying to pull that data together through external validation. It just didn't work because it was garbage in, garbage out.
But what out of those 99 things that people said about you, you want to take out and put in your CV?
Right.
That's what makes it different.
I think on the LinkedIn, people are very generous in terms of saying that, oh, you are good at that. That might not mean. If the bigger question is that, are we saying that we can't assess people at all? If we are saying that there is some way of assessing, the assessment need not be a typical certification exam, which is like multiple choice question. The assessment can be to reviewing the project work. The assessment can be to speaking to people who have worked with you in the past and taking their feedback. If we increase the definition of assessment, and if the answer is that yes, there is a way to assess people to know whether they really know that a skill, whether they have worked on those areas or not. If the answer is yes, then we can always as a learning provider, I would be big endorser of this kind of view, that let me be the training provider, let me have someone learn those skills, and let someone else assess, so that these two act as independent bodies. And I see it working very well in few areas. Again, I'll give example to cloud. If someone wants to hire, say, Amazon cloud architect, and Amazon says that, AWS says that, yes, we have tested it, this guy knows, he did all the assignment, he did all the project that we test, and we say he's a tick mark from our side. If anyone is looking to hire a AWS architect as part of team, and if they see a certification from AWS, I think that's a great standard for them to hire, and I already see the market playing that way.
But first, it's interesting that we started talking about lifelong learning, and then we are having a conversation that is completely in the realm of performance management and assessment. But also, you talked about certification. So if you look at what's happening today in the cloud space, for instance, so you can go and get an Amazon Web Services certificate, and you could probably go and get the same thing from Google and the same thing from the different cloud. And I would say this is temporarily, because each one of them is proprietary right now. Yeah. But if you look at other industries, how it would work, eventually they will have to cooperate, and eventually it will become commodity, and then there's no need for the certification anymore. When you look at those spaces, there are no certification, because it's the industry regulating itself and not one body, one Amazon. Like today, Amazon has some kind of a power over the industry, because their platform is, I guess people are saying, used the most. I'm not endorsing Amazon, but used the most, and then their certification worth the most in the industry. But it's short-sighted. So whatever currency you will try to make, if it's not common to everyone, if it's only coming from each one of you, it's not going to last for long. Mm-hmm. It'll have to be somehow shared, and I still think it will be based on what people claim they have and can prove, as you just talked about.
There was an interesting startup years ago, and I don't know whatever happened to them. I don't think it ended well, but they had they would basically have you rate. So it's like, all right, I worked for both of you. Which one of you is better at X? And so by constantly swapping out, the combination of the four of us asking which one of you is better, they were trying to get to a stacked ranking of anyone who had that skill. What does the general collective wisdom say about each of these people?
But then either people will become jerks or they become very, very generous.
Well, yeah,
It's
is it a
never-
popularity contest or is it a skill assessment? Yeah, so it was just an interesting approach.
Let me ask you guys a different question. I think part of the if you look at the academic world and the bachelor's, master's, PhD world, sort of the traditional sort of higher ed world, I always thought that part of the value of that degree was the sorting and the sifting. Meaning that the admissions office sort of goes through and sort of figures out if you're going to be a potential fit, and whether that's good or bad. I mean, that's a whole different discussion. But there is value in that. You could think
as long as the sailing club scholarship isn't involved.
Yeah, that's a whole different subject. Yes, but I mean, there is a sorting, sifting mechanism that happens. Is there such a thing that should happen in lifelong learning, or how is that value sort of, or that sort of selection happening? Because it seems like in many of the platforms you could take whatever course you're ready for, right, skills wise.
Yeah, I think the way I would answer that is the old world is binary credentials. If I get a CPA certification, that means I meet some arbitrary threshold of mastery. If I miss if I don't pass the exam by 2 questions,
Yeah.
you have no way to show any expertise. On the other hand, if you have 100 CPAs sitting in a room, who's the best? Who's the best at M&A? Who's the best at securities? Who's the best at privacy? I mean, the problem is I think solved by having a mechanism in which you certify skills at different levels of mastery and allow sort of individuals to say, I may be only a level 2 expert and I want to be a level 6 expert. What is my path to get from there to there? And so for me, the gating mechanism ought to just live with the motivation of the individual and from wherever they sit and whatever aspirations they have, but they need a way to signal beyond the binary, right? That's just such a huge limitation that we have in credentialing.
Yeah, I just think the best signal is seeing the actual work. And now, unfortunately, that's slow and painful to produce in mass. It doesn't scale well as a broader assessment mechanism. But that's as part of every class on Skillshare, there's a project. So you take the class, you watch the video, you ask questions of the instructor, but then you actually produce something, you upload it, you get feedback. Because if you're not putting it to work and you can't actually see what you've produced at the end of it, I can take the how to draw a tree class all day long. It wasn't until I actually uploaded the picture of my tree, and I can draw a damn good tree for the record, that I had proof I can draw a tree. So I think there's no shortcut to that of actually just seeing the work.
And so I agree to that view that projects are going to become a reality to show what you have learned, and that's what we also do, and we see a lot of value in that. What I also see is that some kind of pre-assessment will also become a reality, where you pre-assess and suggest whether you should send him to a foundation course in that area if he's interested, or you send them to an expert course depending upon where he stands. So I see that also going forward becoming, most of the companies today are in the race to acquire more and more customers, so that maybe they are admitting a lot of people, but at some point of time they have to do some kind of gating to make sure that the quality that they're producing is good.
And I agree for certain industries, but when you think about sort of solving the whole currency world, and design may be very helpful to see the work, but I'm thinking, well, is, for example, in other areas where you have to test things that are very, very non-visible, empathy or creativity or leadership, God, what is that, right? So how do you sort of assess that? In many jobs, you need those types of hard-to-find skills, and I'm not sure the college itself has a good answer.
Definitely not. I would say definitely not, and
But
I'm not sure that there's a solution for that. But we also need to acknowledge that there's any kind of certification. I agree that colleges and universities do have, the sorting mechanism is useful. but there's a shelf life for the certificate.
Yep.
I'll give you my example. I've got a law degree. Don't get a legal advice from me. I've got my MBA from NYU with, it says with in finance, don't get financial advice from me. It's been a long time ago. I haven't been practicing that. So what's use of that? So it looks very nice in my office, but that's all it is right now.
Well, we have 2.5 minutes. I don't know if anybody has a question, but I was gonna, if there's a hand, we could take a question or two. If not, I can do a rapid fire finale here. So let me ask you guys this, since there's no takers here. What would be the one thing, you know, when you think about outside of your specific company and just think more globally, what would be the one thing that you'd hope we could solve, if there's one thing, there may be a couple, to actually get to the nirvana that hopefully we all want to get to, which is a world where fluidity of human resources and sort of value of human resources is fair. And that, to me, it seems like a pretty good end goal in the next 20, 30, 40 years, hopefully. How do you get there? What would be the one thing that you'd want to see?
I think it's what we said at the beginning, and you started with that, it's lifelong learning. I mean, the speed of change is so rapid that people really need to become lifelong learning. And whoever not going to get it is going to be out of job or their existing job in the next, I would say, 2 to 3 years. I've seen it happening in our industry. I've seen entire areas of the business actually shrinking to the extent that the people that were the heroes in the past are now looking for a new job, and they need to reskill themselves. And they just didn't pick up the messages or what we try to help them become lifelong learners.
Jonathan?
I'd say outcome-based skill credentials that are accepted on the supply and demand side of the market is the nirvana, right? And from the degreed perspective, we hope that we have a meaningful contribution to that end. It's a hard problem. It's a two-sided marketplace problem. You have to get the demand side using the language. You have to get the supply side using the language. It's going to take time.
Yeah.
But that's for me what would be the ultimate goal.
Yeah. So my perspective, if you're driving a car and if you don't have insurance, it's okay. But if you are in a job and if you're not a lifelong learner, it's not going to work.
I think for us, there's the phrase, talent is equally distributed and opportunity is not. A lot of the skill validation requires you to actually have the opportunity to show that you can do it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of opportunity. Not everybody has access to Ivy League education. How do we give people that kind of access to learn the things they need to show that they can do it, to provide everybody with that validation that they actually do have the capability. That's something we talk about a lot at Skillshare, is just how do we make it more accessible and open up those opportunities for everyone.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you for staying. I want to give these guys a round of applause.